Hello there. Welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 30th of January. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 341 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition. Then I will introduce our guest for this evening, and then together we will discuss today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Russian shelling of residential areas in Ukraine's southern city of Kherson left at least 3 people dead and 10 injured. A missile hit an apartment building in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, killing 1 person and injuring 3 others, according to the regional governor Oleg Sinyhubov. Ukraine's military and Russia's Wagner private military group are both claiming to have control in the area of Blahodatny, which is in eastern Donetsk. The new US ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, was heckled by a crowd of people chanting anti-US slogans as she entered the Russian Foreign Ministry in Moscow to present her diplomatic credentials. Ukraine's state-run energy operator, Ukrenergo, has said that there is a significant deficit in the country's energy system due to damage caused by Russian missile attacks. President Tayyip Erdogan has signalled that Turkey might agree to Finland joining NATO without Sweden, amid growing tensions between Turkey and Stockholm. President Volodymyr Zelensky said he met with Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, in the southern Ukrainian region of Mykolaiv, and also discussed the impact of Russian missile and drone strikes. The Kremlin said today that the former British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was lying when he said that the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, had threatened him with a missile strike during a phone call in the run-up to the invasion of Ukraine. Authorities in Slovenia have apprehended 2 alleged Russian spies who used an agency dealing in real estate and antiques as a front for their activities. Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, said it cannot be ruled out that Poland and the Baltic states may break off diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation entirely. The Ukrainian Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, has told the Politico website that he wants the country to join the European Union within 2 years. Václav Gladkov, the governor of the Belgorod region in Russia, has said that the shelling of Belzyudovka from Ukraine had injured 2 people. The NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg has urged South Korea to increase military support to Ukraine, suggesting it reconsider its policy of not exporting weapons to countries in conflict. Ukraine's military will spend nearly $550 million on drones in 2023, and 16 supply deals have already been signed with Ukrainian manufacturers, the Defence Minister Alexei Reznikov said earlier today. And US military officials are reportedly urging the Pentagon to supply F-16 jets to Ukraine so it is better able to defend itself from Russian missiles and drones. Now, we are lucky enough to be joined this evening by a regular friend to the programme. William Duguid is an activist, commentator and blogger, and he also helps to run the Perth and Kinross Yes Hub. William, good evening. How are you keeping?
I'm just fine, thank you, Andrew, and I hope you're doing well yourself.
Absolutely, thanks, William. All the better for seeing you on Broadcasting Scotland this evening. Our first story this evening is that Rishi Sunak has said that he can restore the integrity back into politics, as he began a fight back against the political damage from sacking Nadhim Zahawi as the Conservative Party chair and Minister without portfolio for breaches of the ministerial code over his tax affairs. The Prime Minister, answering questions after an NHS-themed address at Teesside University in Darlington, said that he had acted decisively to dismiss Zahawi on Sunday after receiving the findings of an investigation by his new ethics advisor, Laurie Magnus. Meanwhile, the SNP has urged Rishi Sunak to immediately remove the whip from Boris Johnson after revelations confirming that he was receiving financial advice from the BBC chairman Richard Sharp. Despite Johnson describing claims he received advice from Sharp as complete nonsense, new details have emerged that the former Prime Minister was told by his Permanent Secretary Simon Case to stop seeking Sharp's advice on his personal financial matters. Commenting, the SNP Cabinet Office spokesperson Kirsty Blackman MP said, "These latest revelations are devastating for Boris Johnson and shows how he has lied through his teeth about his relationship with the BBC's chairman. Rishi Sunak should remove the whip from Johnson immediately." His appointment of Richard Sharp as BBC chair absolutely reeks of cronyism and corruption, and a full investigation must be carried out into the appointment by Boris Johnson. So, William, when he was speaking at Teesside University this morning, the Prime Minister said, what you can hold me accountable for is what did you do about it? What I did, he said, is that as soon as I knew about the situation, was to appoint someone independent who looked at it, I got the advice, and then I acted pretty decisively. Now, having listened to the Prime Minister saying that this morning, it struck me that doesn't quite scan. We've already been told that the Cabinet Office flagged up Zahawi's financial situation, I'll call it that, when he was appointed Chancellor by Johnson in the summer. So was all of that waving of red flags, do you think, was it forgotten when Zahawi was made Minister without portfolio and party chair by Sunak? Or was it overlooked? Or like his predecessor, did Sunak just plain ignore the advice that the Cabinet Office were giving him?
I wouldn't be at all surprised if he just ignored it, because Zahawi would have been a Wheel Kent face. He might have thought he'd be a safe pair of hands, and he might not have thought that the story would get out. If not for the hard work of Dan Needle, who was the main needle in Zahawi's case, and had he kowtowed to the lawsuit that Zahawi's solicitors placed on him, maybe this story would never have got out. It does look as if Sunak very likely just went with it on the basis that it would never be heard, and he was wrong.
You're absolutely right, William, to be commenting on the hard work from Dan Needle, who persevered, as you say, in the face of significant legal threats from Zahawi's lawyers, until the mainstream media finally picked up on the story. But thinking more widely for a moment about the current cabinet, we've got Gavin Williamson resigned before he was sacked. Braverman was accused of bullying and was sacked for breach of the ministerial code before she returned 6 days later. But Braverman's accused of bullying. Rabb's accused of lots of bullying. Andrew Bridgen's been suspended from the House for lobbying. Johnson's being investigated for corruption again. I think 2 Tory ex-MPs are in jail for sex offences, and Zahawi's been sacked for lying about his tax affairs. And of course, the Prime Minister himself has been fined by the cops, not once, but twice this year, or in the past 12 months. So what do you think are the chances that Rishi Sunak can, as he says, restore the integrity back into politics?
Integrity is hard to restore when it's being attacked from so many angles. In some ways, it's a reminder of the dog days of the John Major government between 1995 and 1997. The slight difference, though, is it does seem to be an awful lot of individuals who were causing the trouble for Major that eventually resulted in his catastrophic election defeat in 97. In this case, it seems to be just a network of corruption, because not only is it hard to become sacked, it seems to be hard to stay sacked. If you look at Suella Braverman as an example of that, Zahawi himself has been all over various positions and has had various scandals over the years, but still he persists. So it's the culture we're talking about. And once a culture is corrupted, whatever Sunak's intentions may be, and I suspect one of his intentions might be just to have an easy life as Prime Minister, but who knows what will happen there. It doesn't really matter what you do. It's doomed. The whole culture just appears to be moving towards its inevitable, slightly untidy conclusion.
It's a good point that you make with regard to the Major administration and the dog days of that. Although I suppose, at least in those cases, Jeffrey Archer went to jail, Jonathan Aitken went to jail, Neil Hamilton went to jail. So there's maybe a contrast here. None of these members of the Johnson, Truss, Sunak cabinet have yet found themselves on the wrong side of the bars, but it's maybe not far away. And I was thinking again about the general politics a little bit. Rishi Sunak will pass the symbolic 100-day milestone this week, with several millstones now around his neck. And although it might be argued that he impressed the markets with a rather more sure-footed response to economic affairs than his predecessor, Liz Truss, this particular former banker and hedge fund manager doesn't seem really to have stamped any authority on the party, or to have improved his position with the country. His approval ratings are heading in the direction of Johnson's at the moment. So it appears maybe that what is portrayed as quiet competence isn't enough, even though people are maybe delighted that we're not, after 12 months of political pratfalls and chaos in Downing Street, people are maybe enjoying that. But do you think, is the Sunak brand, is it enough to rescue the Tories' electoral chances?
No, the only thing that will rescue the Tories' electoral chances is the Labour Party messing it up, I think. They seem to have a fairly solid lead in the polls. Keir Starmer is doing his best to be vanilla hopeless man, but honestly, it really is Labour's to throw away at this stage. I don't think you recover from the cultural rot that seems to be there in the Tory party right now. What you need is a government with a wealth of experience, but this is a government that seems mostly to have an experience of wealth and nothing much else. So watch this space, because we don't know when the election will be, but I'm not. I'm not going to be gambling on the Tories winning it, I'm afraid.
Certainly not. Thank you. That a wealth of experience of wealth is a great line. Thank you, William. We'll move now, however, to our next item this evening, because firefighters across the UK have voted for strike action, with 88% voting in favour on a 73% turnout, the union has said. In the hope of averting strike action, the Fire Brigades Union has given government and employers 10 days to come forward with an improved offer, which could be put to a vote of members. If they go ahead, the strikes could be held as soon as the 23rd of February, and would be the first nationwide fire strike over pay in 20 years. Commenting on the FBU ballot for strike action, the Scottish Government's Community Safety Minister, Elena Whittam, said, "It is disappointing that the Fire Brigades Union has voted for industrial action. At this point, we would encourage continued negotiations through the well-established collective bargaining arrangements." The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service has comprehensive contingency plans for industrial action, based on making the best use of the resources available to keep communities safe. So, William, firstly, polling at the moment seems to show reasonably strong support for strike action by firefighters. The Fire Brigades Union says it's around 2 to 1 of the public back the industrial action, while only 33% oppose it. So, do you think, in light of polling like that, do you think Number 10 will wake up and smell the coffee with regard to negotiations with at least the firefighters?
I don't see what's different about the firefighters that will change the overall attitude of Westminster, really, to all of these strikes, which is just to wait it out and seemingly to avoid having meetings that are anything other than just, I don't know, like almost for show, and hope that the public appetite for supporting the unions diminishes. But I would have thought that over the winter months, particularly, when people are having a fairly hard time with things anyway, that's the period when they're most likely to feel the pinch, when they're suffering from various strikes, and when they're most likely to turn against the unions. As the weather improves, this seems a very strange thing, but I think maybe their mood might improve. Obviously, there is the question of, will this go on forever? But people are all feeling the pinch, and therefore they all tend to identify with what the strikers are about. And the latest Sky News poll, again, bears out what you said, just generally about strikes. There's a surprisingly high level of public support, and it ain't going away, because the government is seen as the bad guys, and the unions are, well, they're like us.
Well, that's a very good point, William. And I was going to ask you about the tactics with regard to this particular industrial action, given the 10-day period that the Fire Brigades Union has offered. But it also crossed my mind that there are lots of potential political bear traps around this story and this industrial action. Michael Gove was talking about the Grenfell disaster just on the weekend. He brought it up on his media round on Sunday. In Edinburgh, we had the tragic death of the firefighter Barry Martin last week, following the fire in the Jenner's department store in Rose Street, the first firefighter killed in Scotland since 2009. And of course, this all comes as fresh research is showing that firefighters are significantly more likely to develop cancer than the general population. So again, it's not a surprise that firefighters seem to have broad public support. So do you think, and with that and the point you were making before, will Number 10 see that and use the 10-day period to have a discussion with the union, or will they just let that, as you say, in a performative sense, will they just let that 10-day period offered by the trade union, will they just let that tick down, possibly just having a go at the firefighters through the pages of the tabloid press?
I think they'll start by having a go at them and seeing how that pans out. They might be panicked into talks before the end of the 10-day period, but to be quite honest with you, I really don't see that the government has any real feeling that they want to solve these. They are waiting it out, and I think they will keep doing so.
Thanks, William. And one more general item with regard to broadening out from the firefighters' proposed industrial action. If the strikes go ahead in the fire service, no doubt it will be the military who are brought in to try to cover. And as we've seen already during the recent industrial action, members of the Royal Navy were working as border force agents in airports in the south of England, not with a great deal of success, it has to be said. Do you think that we might begin, we've seen a little bit of this, but do you think we might begin to see more objections by the military, by them being used more and more in a random range of ways as the government tries to paper over the cracks in public service?
That's possible. They can't, after all, be everywhere at once. We'll have to see what the nature of the firefighters' strike action actually is, and to what extent it's felt that they can cover the contingencies and keep life and limb safe at the very least. But yeah, I can see, particularly at a time when the army the armed services are being decried as not quite the fighting force they once were. This can be seen perhaps as another straw that will break their back. So yeah, it's quite possible that there may be high-level discussions about that sort of thing, and it'll be interesting to see whether that has any effect on changing the overall attitude of the government.
Thanks, William. And actually, we'll look at that issue and look at this issue a little bit from a slightly different perspective now, because opposition parties have said that the strikes minimum service levels bill, which is due to pass through the House of Commons final stages this week, will rip up the right to strike for millions of workers across the UK. The SNP said that the UK government should be taking a lead from the Scottish Government, who have sat down with unions to negotiate a fair pay deal for public sector workers. In the House of Commons this afternoon, Angela Rayner, leading for Labour, said that the bill goes from clapping nurses to sacking nurses. And the SNP MP Alan Brown said, as this piece of draconian legislation is passed, it highlights exactly why Scotland needs to become an independent country. Workers across Scotland have watched the Tories crash the economy and send inflation into orbit. Instead of sorting the problems, the Tory UK government would rather see them sacked for striking. He went on, this is a direct attack on working people, and it is only with independence that Scotland can be certain to protect workers' rights from this callous Tory government. So, William, following on from the conversation we just had, is clapping for nurses during the pandemic and then sacking them for asking for a little bit more money in their pay, is that going to go down well with voters, do you think?
I don't think it will. I think there's particularly again the Sky poll showed that the attitudes to particular sectors differed, and the NHS is very, very high in public support. And the clapping, although it might have been performative for the politicians and other prominent folk, it was genuinely felt by the people. And a lot of people around here certainly were out there banging their pots and all sorts, and they perfectly understand why these folk need to be paid properly for what they do, and also they need to be given much, much better support in terms of not letting the workforce drift away, recruitment, and general looking after, and they're not getting it. So, I think sacking nurses is not on the agenda of most people and would not be approved. And certainly this draconian approach to industrial disputes that all stem from the same basic cause and that people recognise, that isn't going down well either, I think.
Thanks, William. And now this bill returns to the Commons today and will pass through the Commons for the last time this evening. But of course, that's in the same week that the UK will be hit by the biggest days of industrial action in years, if not decades. Teachers, train drivers, university lecturers and security guards will all join around 100,000 civil servants in walkouts on Wednesday. So with such a wide range of workers, of people who of the working community, is the Tory government simply trying to start another culture war here, this time with lots of workers, in a desperate effort to distract from everything else that's going so badly for the government at the moment?
I don't know quite what they're doing, because most of us would assume it has some sort of logical basis, but it really doesn't. They don't really appear to be reacting very well to anything, and there doesn't seem to be any particular rhyme or reason about it. I still think we have an outside chance of there ultimately being a general strike, although what we're currently experiencing is getting on for a general strike, because it's happening in so many different sectors simultaneously. And it's a chaotic situation, and I don't really at the moment see how anything other than a volte-face, if you like, from the government is going to change it. I do think that Scotland is distinctive in the way that it's trying to sort out the problems. The difficulty with Scotland is that it doesn't have the finances to actually achieve that beyond a certain level. They've done reasonably well with what they've got, but it is limited and it can't be increased unless something happens at UK level. And that is really why independence is what we require in order really to rebuild our whole attitude to industrial relations and just the way we run our public services.
Thank you, William. Now we'll move on a little bit and have a look at fiscal policy and macroeconomics, because the Bank of England is poised to raise interest rates for the 10th time in succession when its policymakers beat this week in a further squeeze on the finances of mortgage holders and businesses. Financial markets are betting on a 0.5 percentage point increase in the central bank's base rate to 4%, which will be the highest level since the 2008 financial crisis. It comes after 9 straight rate increases by the bank's Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC, since December 2021. Adding to the pressure on homeowners, the anticipated rate increase also comes as the bank faces a delicate balancing act between driving high inflation out of the system and the risk that its actions exacerbate an economic downturn. After the rate increase expected this week, with most economists polled by Reuters envisaging one more rate rise to 4.25% in March, while financial markets are pricing in the tightening cycle ending in the middle of this year at 4.5%. Late last year, the Bank of England warned that the UK stood on the brink of a prolonged recession as the cost of living crisis forces households to cut back on their spending. After a surge in energy bills and the rising cost of a weekly shop, inflation reached 11.1% in October but fell back slightly to just over 10% in December. So, William, Threadneedle Street, the Bank of England, said late last year that Britain stood on the bank of a prolonged recession. After the surge in energy bills and the rising cost of a weekly shop, inflation was running at 10% in December. So, do you think post Brexit, I'll do this in order, post austerity, post Brexit, and post pandemic, do you think there's enough resilience left in the UK economy to handle inflation like this and to handle such a rapid increase in the cost of borrowing?
I don't think it's a good idea to risk putting up the cost of borrowing too high. There are signs that um, inflation may be coming down, as you alluded to there, um, because of the factors that caused it, many of which were external and perhaps were one off. And we're thinking in terms of things connected with the Ukraine war there. It's quite likely that inflation will come down fairly sharply in any case. And this latest increase and the anticipated next one are possibly now over-egging it a bit, if that's true. Of course, nobody knows the future, and neither does the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, because they tend to be a wee bit split in it. In December, I think they split three ways. There were a couple that didn't want to move interest rates at all, and there was one who thought it was not high enough, that they were putting things up. But for anybody who paid for Christmas with a credit card, and I think we were hearing earlier in the month that Christmas was pretty much done by maxing out people's credit cards this year. This is not good news, and it doesn't bode well for the health of the economy in terms of people being able to spend money in it, which is how it's the oil that keeps it going. It doesn't bode well for that at all. And I would, if not that I'm an economist, but if I were on the policy committee, I'd call canny at the minute, because I think there's no need to try and push inflation down faster than it's already going, because the downside risk is quite worrying.
Absolutely, William. And actually, you're early into the game here, because I was going to talk to you about the MPC and in particular the vote back in December. As you say, it split three ways, with two members, Silvana Tanrero and Swati Dhingra, voting to end the process of rate increases, while Catherine Mann backed a larger 0.75 percentage point move. And I was just wondering, do you think that three-way split suggests that, I don't know, economists are deeply divided about the UK economy, even the ones who work for the Bank of England?
Yes, I don't think I think economics is an exact science at all. Mind you, I do tend to read quite a lot of Richard Murphy, so of course I would disagree with the Monetary Policy Committee putting rates up too much. But I think economists can give you any sort of story. They're just predicting the future the same as everybody else. They're maybe making educated guesses, but they are guesses. However, when the basic cause of inflation is very much outside the control of the normal factors, and it's caused by external events, then I think you have to be particularly careful not to sugar things around too much, because those things do tend to self-correct, and you don't want to damage that.
That's a very sage advice. Thank you, William. Thank you. We'll move on now to our next item now, though, because the SNP has said that Scottish pensioners are getting a raw deal from the UK government and with their attacks on the rights and benefits of Scotland's elderly population. The SNP were responding to reports of secret UK government plans to increase the pension age to 68, which were revealed last week. The SNP Social Justice spokesperson David Linden MP said that Tory attacks on pensioners have come thick and fast over the 12 years that they've been in power, as he pointed to the scrapping of free TV licences, pension credit cuts, raises to the state pension age, and attacks on the triple lock. Analysis has shown that the UK's state pension is one of the worst in northwest Europe, lagging seriously behind countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and Germany. The Glasgow East MP said that older people should be able to live with dignity and respect. He said, whether it's raises in the state pension age, attacks on the triple lock, scrapping of free TV licences, pension credit cuts, or the fact the UK delivers one of the worst pensions in North West Europe, it's clear that pensioners in Scotland are getting a raw deal under Westminster control. Attacks on pensioners have come thick and fast since the Tories came to office in 2010 and show no signs of stopping. In 2014, the people of Scotland were warned that the only way to protect their pensions was by voting no. Since then, they've had to contend with Westminster piling on the damage as the livelihoods of older people in Scotland have been hammered. So, William, this certainly intrigued me. There have been a number of political stories over the weekend talking, dissecting the electorate along the lines of their age and their voting behaviours. And whilst David Linden was saying that we're seeing raises in the state pension age, the triple lock attacked, free TV licences scrapped, pension credit cut, and a very, very poor pension when compared to other similar countries in Northwest Europe. I wondered about the politics of this. Pensioners are those most likely to have voted no in 2014 and to have voted leave in 2016. The average age of a member of the Tory party is 72, according to the Bow Group. So being mistreated in the way that David Linden describes, is that not precisely what these older folks voted for?
I think your average 72-year-old Tory voter is probably not dependent on the state pension alone. And you can do calculations that say, well, when you look at the rounded picture, the UK is still behind, but it's not quite as far behind, as if that were some sort of an excuse, because a lot of the options to increase your pension are arguably only options for the better off. So it is a political hot potato potentially, I think. And with regard to Scotland, obviously the SNP already has a policy of increasing after independence the basic Scottish state pension to what the new state pension is in the rest of the UK now. But campaigning organisations like Believe in Scotland would go far, far further than that, because their polling is showing that the well-being economy and the pension that's attached to that, which the minimum they say to live with dignity is somewhere between £210 and £225 a week, which is about £45 up on even the new state pension and something like £80 up on the current thing that most people get. That really does resonate as something that can change people's minds. I don't think people have forgotten that they were told that a no vote was what would protect the pension, and they feel let down by that. And I think that could have resonance if pushed properly. We haven't yet campaigned effectively, though, on it. That's the real thing. Believe in Scotland have got a petition, various leaflets with a petition, where people are invited to ask for more for the basic state pension. And the take-up of that has not been particularly impressive. So we have work to do, but it's a winning topic, and it needs to be looked at as part of this, if you like, the vision of Scotland that we're trying to present to people.
It's a very good point that you make, William, especially bearing in mind that the position of pensions certainly was a significant factor in Project Fear during the independence referendum in 2014. So we'll looking forward to seeing facts coming into the debate and seeing if they are persuasive of voters as we go forward. But we'll move on to our next item now, because profits from global commodities trading for companies including Vitol and Trafigura have nearly doubled to more than $50 billion in recent years, driven by volatile oil prices, fresh analysis has shown. Global commodities trading profits ballooned to about $52 billion of profits in 2021, up from $27 billion in 2018, and are expected to continue to grow, according to a report by the consultancy McKinsey & Company. The study estimated that most of the growth was driven by higher profits from oil trading, which increased by more than 90% to $18 billion during the period. Profits from trading in power and gas increased from $7 billion to $13 billion. McKinsey said that the value of the sector continued to rise during 2022, which resulted in the profits of commodities traders coming under scrutiny after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war triggered volatility in commodity markets, notably oil and gas, allowing traders to make significant margins on the sharp price moves. Despite moves from some other fossil fuel firms to decarbonise, trading in oil and gas, as well as other commodities such as agricultural products and metals, remains highly lucrative. The oil market at the moment is built on a string of complex financial instruments based around prices for current and future contracts for delivery of oil. It is estimated that about 13 times the physical amount of oil that's taken out of the ground is actually traded through purely financial contracts. So, William, firstly, in 2021, Trafigura rewarded its top traders and executives with financial rewards worth more than $1 billion in total after they made record profits from the market upheaval during the COVID pandemic. At $1.1 billion, the rewards were 87% up on 2020, and they were following volatility in metals markets, which had helped the company to double its net profit to $3.1 billion, the highest in its 28-year history. So it was $1.1 billion paid as bonuses in 2021, and this year it looks like it's going to be $1.4 billion paid in bonuses following increased profits. Is this direction of travel in the behaviour of a business like Trafigura, is it sustainable?
Um, it's sustainable as long as you print the money to make it happen. It's a perfect illustration of chaos bringing opportunity for some. It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. And in this case, it's commodities traders, particularly after the Ukraine war and the effect that had on the oil market. It shows how oil is still a big thing, which is slightly depressing, and how far decarbonisation has a long way to go. It does make me wonder if the future of the world economy might be better if we didn't operate with a hidden world of parasitical middlemen, but that's the way it seems to be, and that is, I think, to a great extent, what's holding us back. It would be lovely if some of that wealth did trickle down to other people, but when you've got a rich elite above you, however they are the rich elite. It's not the wealth that's trickling down on you.
Well, that's absolutely right, William. And I was going to look at one element of that with you as well, thinking about how citizens and governments can deal with this type of gouging of profits. Trafigura is a Swiss-founded company now incorporated in Singapore. Its immediate holding company is Trafigura Beheer, a company incorporated in the Netherlands, and Trafigura Beheer is ultimately controlled by the Farringford Foundation, which, surprise, surprise, is established and registered under the laws of Panama. So which government do you think should be looking at addressing the opportunity to be regulating these traders and introducing windfall taxes? Should it be the government of Singapore or the government of the Netherlands or the government of Panama or somewhere else?
I think all the governments have to get together. This will never happen, so it's my idealistic world again. But first of all, we have to make sure that governments are completely independent of the parasitical middlemen, and then the governments of the world have to get together to say, right, how does this world operate on a financial basis going forward, bearing in mind that we have to be sustainable and we're very close to tipping ourselves over the edge, and we cannot afford to carry passengers. We can't afford to carry people who are just gouging money, and therefore a combined effort seriously to tax these people properly would not go amiss, and I will not see it in my lifetime. I almost promise you.
No, I can understand exactly where you're coming from, William, I'm afraid to say, but you never know. We'll look at another aspect of the green economy now, because the EU is stepping up its green subsidy race with the US through plans to loosen state aid rules on tax credits for renewable energy projects. European policymakers have been under pressure to respond to the US President Joe Biden's $369 billion Inflation Reduction Act, which aims to encourage renewables investment in everything from electric cars to wind turbines. The European Commission's plans to loosen state aid rules to enable investment into production facilities in green industries, according to the draft plans. The draft proposals reportedly suggest some of a €800 billion COVID-19 recovery fund could be redirected towards tax credits. Europe's energy system has been under intense scrutiny since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Moscow's subsequent throttling of gas supplies into Europe. Brussels intends to set new targets for green industrial capacity and to simplify the approval process for renewables projects. It plans to increase the level at which deals are scrutinised by the Commission under state aid rules. Biden's new rules, introduced last autumn, have reinvigorated the renewables market in the US, leading to a wave of new projects. The president hailed the legislation as the biggest step forward on climate ever when he signed the bill last year. It has been estimated that the legislation could reduce US emissions by about 40% by 2030, compared with 2005 levels, bringing Biden close to the goal of cutting US emissions in half by the end of the decade. So, William, as I say, European policymakers have been under pressure to respond to Joe Biden's £300 billion Inflation Reduction Act, which is encouraging renewables investment in everything from cars to turbines. So, in a sense, with the European response, does this sound like it's turning into a race to the top?
Maybe that's how I get my ideal world, a race to the top, and that's how everybody gets together. Yes, in a way, if they're going to remain, quote, competitive, the EU does not have much choice, and they have to liberalise the way these things can be done. And yes, that could be a help. I'm not quite so sure about the UK, who aren't now bound by EU state aid rules anyway. And if anything, ministers here have discouraged investment in renewables by extending the windfall tax that they took last year to wind and solar. So there needs to be a tilting of the playing field, I think, towards renewables if we're going to be sustainable. And I think any move by the EU, whether it's just a response to the US or not, is extremely welcome.
Thanks, William. And to now seek to tie together the last two items, from previously about trading oil and gas, and now attempts by the EU to promote investment in green industrial projects, Chris Hewitt, who's the chief executive of the industry body Solar Energy UK, has accused the UK government of offering more generous tax terms to oil and gas projects and of, quote, tilting the playing field against renewables. Is that a surprise?
I just used the quote in the opposite direction there, but I actually did nick it from Chris Hewitt, although I meant it in the sense that I did. Yeah, it's not again, it's not encouraging, and one hopes that maybe there might be something better to come from Labour. I know Ed Miliband has an idea of an anti-OPEC alliance, as he would term it. Ed Miliband is the shadow climate change secretary. I'm not sure the government actually has a climate change secretary as such, because all those portfolios were scrunched around. But nevertheless, it's good old Ed Miliband. We all remember him. And looking at lowering costs for people and a cleaner technology, and that's the sort of thing we need. I don't see that sort of impetus from the UK government, who I think are still working on this slightly chaotic way of doing things. Because, as I said before, from chaos tends to come opportunity. And that's not the way we need to be looking at things right now. We need to be far, far more radical than that.
Thanks, William. And it just crosses my mind, tying back to the first story as well, that of course Nadhim Zahawi was the minister without portfolio, which would require then the opposition to have a shadow minister for without portfolio, which suggests to me that there were two people working in Westminster who weren't doing very much. It's not clear whether the minister without the shadow minister without portfolio has been replaced or not now that Zahawi is away. But certainly the operation of Westminster in political terms and in terms of energy markets is undoubtedly something that you and I will be talking about again in the very near future, I suspect. We'll move abroad now for our next item because at least 48 people have been killed and more than 150 injured in a suicide bombing carried out by the Pakistan Taliban at a mosque in the city of Peshawar, as the security situation in the country continues to deteriorate. The blast struck as 300 worshippers were praying in the mosque, located inside the police lines area of Peshawar in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, where the city's police headquarters and counter-terrorism officers are based. Most of those inside the mosque were thought to be police officers. The impact of the explosion collapsed the roof on one wall of the mosque and injured many people, said Zafar Khan, a local police officer. Witnesses said that the blast took place in the main hall just as afternoon prayers were about to begin, and worshippers were packed tightly inside. According to officials, the bomber had been standing in the very front row. The Pakistani Taliban, known as Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, took responsibility for the attack, claiming it was revenge for a fighter killed in Afghanistan last year. The TTP, which is believed to be close to Al-Qaeda, has waged an insurgency in Pakistan for the past 15 years, fighting for stricter enforcement of Islamic laws and the release of jailed members, and they have been responsible for multiple deadly attacks in the past. Rescuers at the blast scene scrambled to pull worshippers out from underneath the heavy debris from the fallen roof, with at least 20 thought still to be trapped as night fell. Khan said that several of the wounded were in a critical condition at a hospital, and there were fears that the death toll would continue to rise. So, firstly, William, as I said, the mosque is within Peshawar's police lines. That's inside the city's red zone, where a number of important government institutions are based, including the Chief Minister's House, the Governor's House, and the Provincial Assembly for that province of Pakistan. Do you think, is it a worry that the suicide bomber was able to enter this particular mosque, either because the security was inadequate or because, perhaps alternatively, he had some help from someone?
Well, it's a big, big security lapse. Not the first that there's been in Pakistan, and not, I think, reading up on it, that the first that there's been in Peshawar either, which has been a fairly frequent target for this sort of attack. So it continues a troubled history of this sort of thing going on. And certainly they'll be wanting to look at the security. But I think also they will be wanting to look at is there somebody who's letting this happen, who's in on the other side? And undoubtedly, I think that will probably turn out to be the case. But it's a deteriorating security situation in Pakistan that we're seeing, and I don't see an end to it. It's like it just seems to rumble on, and Afghanistan continues to reflect itself in the surrounding world and all the difficulties that are there. So I'm afraid I don't have a story of great hope to tell you there, but there we are.
No, absolutely, William. And to follow on from what you were just saying, I think in 2022 alone, Pakistan's monitoring agencies recorded more than 150 attacks launched by the TTP. They struck out all across the country and killed dozens of people. The authorities fear that the return of power of the Taliban in Afghanistan has emboldened the TTP and has led to its resurgence in Pakistan. So do you think is this terror now beginning to spill over Afghanistan's borders into neighbouring countries?
It might be, and it shows you have actions have consequences, and the decision to come out of Afghanistan, whatever you may think of the historical reasons for being there, um, the consequences weren't just for the short term, but for perhaps the very long term. And the seeds of future events are always in this sort of thing. So it's a complicated world in which we live, and maybe our politicians should take more cognizance of it before they precipitate action.
It's an interconnected world. You're absolutely right, William. Thank you. We'll move on now to our final item this evening, because UK households cut more than 2 million subscriptions to services such as Netflix, Prime Video and Disney Plus last year, as the cost of living crisis fueled the first annual decline since the UK streaming revolution began a decade ago. The total number of having at least one paid-for subscription fell from 17.12 million in 2021 to 16.24 million in 2022. Many households that still stream have multiple subscriptions, with an average of 2.5 services. The total number of video subscriptions fell by just over 2 million last year to 28.5 million. The final quarter of last year offered signs of a modest recovery as the traditionally bumper Christmas period added a net increase of 300,000 subscribers. However, the recovery may be short-lived, with evidence that some new customers were simply looking for a quick binge over the festive period. The research firm Kantar said that the proportion of consumers planning to cancel one or more subscription video on demand service in the first 3 months of 2023 had risen to 12%, up from 9.6%, and that this was indicating short-term holiday quarter subscribers are looking quickly to cut back. Kantar said that Netflix took a 7.5% share of new streaming subscriptions in the final quarter. The growth in UK subscriptions in the final quarter was led by Amazon's Prime Video. It benefited from the popularity of its parent company in the run-up to Christmas, with shoppers automatically getting the service bundled as part of a Prime subscription. Apple Plus, TV Plus and Paramount Plus, which are home to content such as Yellowstone, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and Halo. In total, there were 1.5 million new streaming subscriptions in the UK in the fourth quarter, and 1.2 million cancellations, resulting in the overall growth of 300,000. So, William, there's discussion there that the modest recovery in the final quarter may be short-lived, with some evidence that new customers were simply looking for a quick binge over Christmas. So, do you think is that part of the problem with the subscription business model? Subscribers can cancel.
Well, subscribers can cancel the BBC and do in large numbers in Scotland. So it's not just a problem for subscription services. I think it's probably a market that's still, if not in its infancy, it's still perhaps developing where it's ultimately going. I think people will conclude in the end that there are maybe too many different streaming services, all with their own little things. And all having a tendency suddenly to drop things that you like. Netflix are quite notorious for that. So I think it will develop over time, and I think there will be some consolidation that goes on. Pricing, though, it's a significant price for households who are struggling. Let's face it. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if this were a short-lived binge. But as in all markets, somebody will find a way to come to the top, and when the consolidation happens, they'll be the ones who are rubbing their hands.
Well, that's you again. You get to the next question I had for you, William, before we get to it, because as I was saying, the average household in the UK has 2.5. The average household in the UK has 2.5 subscriptions. I think we've got 3 here at the moment. Do you think is this market going to consolidate anytime soon, or is the number of companies competing for what is clearly a static market in the UK? Are we going to see the number of competitors continue to grow?
I doubt it. I've got 3, and that's all I'm going for. Thank you very much. I'm getting slightly cheesed off with Netflix as it is. Amazon Prime is fine because it delivers parcels for me as well when the post office won't. And I have this thing about Disney Plus. So, that's me. But I think it will be a very different looking market in 5 or 6 years. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And of course, maybe we won't be paying, maybe none of us will be paying a BBC TV license then. And that's a game changer.
Well, that was. I was also going to ask you that question, William. I suppose you could argue that the BBC is a subscription model, albeit it's an annual subscription model backed up with criminal penalties, which require everybody, whether they like it or not, to be paying for it, unless they can show that they are not consuming the BBC. William, do you think that, notwithstanding a potential political change in Downing Street in the next 2 years, do you think that the BBC will eventually be forced to move to a subscription model that is more similar to Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and the rest?
I think it's what the current UK government would like to happen. Whether it's what the BBC would like to happen, I don't know. Um, I'm ambivalent about the BBC because, as you might guess, I totally hate their political coverage, but I do like some of their programming, not least Happy Valley. And I think some of those aspects of the BBC, it would be a pity to lose. I think they'll find a way of surviving and find a model that enables it to keep going. I would very much like to see what happens in an independent Scotland as far as encouraging our broadcasters to get together and do something significant. Maybe that. If I get independence in my lifetime, maybe I'll get that. Who knows?
That's a very good point, William. And I too, I'm in two minds about it. I think the government in Dublin pays a pretty nominal amount to the BBC in order to continue to consume BBC content in Ireland. But I'm not sure whether an independent Scottish government would actually want, whether we would thank them for doing the same or not. I'm not sure. I should also point out that, of course, other subscriptions to television services are available at www.broadcastingscotland.scot. I'm just saying. But I'm afraid that's all that we have time for this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station and to make new programmes for you. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of raising £30,000 to enable us to pay the bills. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Please click on the wee bell. So we will be back tomorrow evening at 7 with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come back and join us again then. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching this evening, and of course I would like to say a very special thanks to our very special guest, William Duguid. Thanks, William.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
I hope everyone has enjoyed Scotland at 7 this evening, and I hope that everyone has a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.